on carefully edited facts, love can turn into loyalty to a version of them that never truly existed. Pay attention to what your partner always avoids, especially the names, places, and years they rush past. Those blank spaces can cost you more than one heartbreak. The night I thought I was saying goodbye to my wife, the hospital smelled like bleach, old coffee, and those wilted carnations people bring when they do not know what else to do. I stood beside her bed at Mercy West in Milwaukee, holding her hand with both of mine, because one hand no longer felt like enough. Nia had lost so much weight her wedding ring kept sliding sideways. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing was shallow, steady only because the machines around her had taken over the job of sounding calm. I bent down and told her I loved her. I told her I was right there. I told her she could rest. Then I stepped into the hallway, because I could not let her see me break apart again. 2 nurses were near the supply room, speaking low in that tired end-of-shift way people do when they think grief belongs only to families. One of them said, "The man from St. Louis has already called twice. He said if she wakes up, tell her Andre and little Kaylin made it back to the hotel." The other answered, "Poor child. She kept asking why her mommy would not open her eyes." My blood went cold so fast it felt like I had swallowed ice. My wife did not know Andre, and she sure as hell did not have a daughter. Before we go any further, I need to ask you something. If you overheard nurses mention a child your wife never told you about, would you confront her immediately or stay quiet until you had proof? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you enjoy intense relationship dramas with twists like this, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who loves emotional storytelling, and subscribe for more stories like this. I did not think so. I walked straight toward them. My shoes squeaked on the polished floor, and they both looked up at once. "Who is Andre?" I asked. My voice sounded too level, which scared me more than if I had shouted. The older nurse glanced at my visitor badge, then at me. "Sir, you need to speak with your wife directly. My wife is sedated," I said, "and unless someone has made a very serious mistake, you just mentioned a child that belongs to her." The younger nurse looked like she wanted to say something, then stopped herself. That hesitation told me everything. There had been no mistake. I went back into Nia's room and stared at the woman I had been married to for 11 years. Her scarf was folded on the chair by the window. Her paperback Bible was on the side table with a pharmacy receipt tucked inside as a bookmark. The skin around her eyes was darker than usual, and the little line between her brows was still there, even in sleep, like she was bracing against one more argument. I sat down slowly. All at once I was back in our kitchen 2 weeks earlier when the oncologist said there was nothing else to do but keep her comfortable. She had squeezed my hand then and whispered, "Please don't ask me for more than I can give." I thought she had meant energy, dignity, time. I did not know she meant the truth. My name is Ellis Boone. I was 39 that spring, a maintenance electrician for the Chicago Transit Authority, born on the South Side and raised by a church-going mother who believed a man's character was obvious in the way he carried groceries into the house. I fix broken systems for a living, wires and signals, and things that fail where nobody notices until everything stops moving. Nia used to tease that I loved old switches and transit maps more than television. She was not wrong. I liked the order. I liked the repairs. I liked believing most things could be traced back to one loose connection. Nia and I met in October at a neighborhood book fair in Bronzeville. I had gone because my friend Daryl's wife was selling handmade journals, and he promised barbecue from a pop-up smoker in the alley. Nia was standing near the poetry table arguing politely with an older man about Gwendolyn Brooks. She had this precise way of speaking, like every sentence had been tested before release. She wore a rust-colored coat and square gold earrings, and she laughed with her whole mouth but not her eyes. That should have told me something. Instead, I thought it made her elegant. I introduced myself while holding a plate of ribs and 2 napkins like an idiot. She was a hospice social worker then, based in Chicago but traveling around Wisconsin and northern Illinois. She said she liked helping families make hard decisions because most people got cruel from fear, not from meanness. I remember that sentence because it made me trust her immediately. It sounded wise and sad and older than she was. Our first real date was at a diner on 47th with cracked vinyl booths and a waitress who called everyone baby. Nia ordered tea in a coffee place, which I found impossible to respect, and she took the lemon wedge out with her fingers because she said bottled juice tasted like a lie. That was Nia. Exactly. Controlled. Unbothered. We build a life the way some people patch a quilt, piece by piece. Practical before beautiful. We rented a narrow brick two-flat in Hyde Park with radiator heat that clanked all winter. I bought a used turntable from a retired music teacher, and Nia started collecting old gospel records from thrift stores and estate sales. Every Saturday morning, she polished our kitchen table with orange oil and opened the windows no matter the season, because she hated stale air. Every New Year's Day, she made black-eyed peas, cornbread, and collards, then wrote one private promise on an index card and tucked into a blue ceramic jar we never opened. That was our marriage to me. To everyone else, too, I think. She brought soup to my mother when arthritis kept her home from church. She sent birthday cards on time. She remembered children's names. She corrected my grammar under her breath when I got too excited telling stories, then smiled so I would not feel embarrassed. We did not have children, though not for lack of trying. She miscarried once, early, 3 years into our marriage, and after that she shut down every conversation about fertility treatments or adoption with the same tired phrase. My heart is not built for that road. I let it go because grief has its own borders. That was my first big decision. I chose not to push. Maybe I also chose convenience. Love feels noble when it is patient, but sometimes patience is just fear dressed up in church clothes. There were things about Nia I never asked enough about. She never wanted to visit St. Louis, where she said she spent part of her childhood. She had one cousin in Gary she spoke to twice a year, and no close friends from before age 26. She changed jobs more often than made sense for someone so competent. Every old photo she kept began in adulthood. Not a single high school picture. Not one college roommate. When I asked once, she said, "Some people survive by editing," and kissed my cheek like that answered anything. We moved to Milwaukee after I got a union transfer, and she took a position at a nonprofit that handled palliative care case management. We bought a small bungalow on a quiet block near Sherman Park, the kind with chain-link fences, tulips and coffee cans, and porches crowded with old men by June. I built a cedar bench or front hall because she hated shoes piled by the door. She painted the laundry room bright yellow because she claimed chores should happen in a room that refused to spare. On Sundays, we went to New Mount Olive Baptist, sat on the left side, fourth pew from the back, and left early enough to beat the fish fry crowd on North Avenue. The illness began with fatigue, so ordinary we named it adulthood. Nia was always tired. Then suddenly she was tired in a way that changed the room. She started forgetting appointments, leaving half-folded towels on the bed, drifting off at the kitchen table while the kettle screamed. Her skin took on a waxy look. Bruises appeared on her arms and shins with no memory attached. I told her to go to urgent care. She said she would after one more week. Then she nearly fainted walking out of church in February, and our deacon's wife caught her by the elbow before she hit the Salt Streak steps. After that, choice disappeared and doctors took over. The diagnosis came in stages because bad news likes company. Blood tests, scans, a bone marrow biopsy, words I had never needed before. Acute leukemia, aggressive, advanced, treatable, then maybe not, hopefully, then maybe not. Hospitals train you to wait, while strangers debate the person you call home. I learned the shape of vending machine dinners. I learned which elevator in oncology was always slower. I learned how many tones a heart monitor could make before your own body started translating them as prophecy. Nia did the things she always did under pressure. She became even more composed. She thanked the nurses by name. She arranged her own blankets. She made me look like the one falling apart. If she had only lied to me about another man, maybe I could have fit that into a familiar box and hated her cleanly. But betrayal rarely arrives in one shape. There had been hints during treatment. Once, while she slept, her phone lit up with a text that said, "Kaylin made the honor roll. She wants to tell you herself." No name, just a number with a St. Louis area code. I stared at it so long the screen went dark. When she woke up, I asked who Kaylin was. Nia looked at me a beat too long and said, "My client's granddaughter." Wrong number. I knew then that answer was flimsy. I accepted it anyway. That was my second decision point. I could have picked up that phone and opened the whole rotten thing right there. Instead, I told myself privacy mattered, that sick people deserved mercy, that suspicion was ugly, all true, also cowardly, because underneath those principles was a selfish hope. As long as I did not prove anything, I could keep being her husband without having to learn what that title meant to her. There is a humiliation in admitting you helped your own deception survive. I was not tricked by every sign. I swallowed several of them whole, because the alternative looked like loneliness in a winter I did not think I could survive. So there I sat in that hospital room in Milwaukee after hearing about Andre and Lil Kalen, listening to the air machine click and release. I watched Nia's face for a twitch, a confession, a signal from God. Something. Nothing. Finally, I stood up and walked down the lobby where the coffee tasted burnt enough to strip paint. I called my friend Daryl, because he is the kind of man who can hold rage without feeding it. He answered on the second ring. "What happened?" I said, "I think my wife has another family." He was silent for 3 full seconds, which told me he understood the sentence and its weight. "Do not go looking wild in a hospital," he said first. "Sit down somewhere and breathe before you do anything stupid." I sat. The plastic chair squealed. I heard nurses talking. I told him, "There's a man from St. Louis. There's a little girl." They said, "Mommy." Daryl exhaled low. "Do you know for certain?" "No." "Then act like you want facts more than drama." I hated him for being right. He said he would drive up from Chicago if I needed him. I told him not yet. Then I sat in that lobby and made myself think like an electrician. Stare at the panel. Trace the line. Find what is feeding what. Nia woke up an hour later. Her eyes were glassy from medication, but alert enough to know I was standing too still. "What is wrong?" she asked. I pulled the chair close, and Saturday, "Who is Andre?" Her face changed so subtly another man might have missed it. Don't panic. Not a shock. Recognition. Then the wall. "Where did you hear that name?" "In the hallway." "And who is Kalen?" She closed her eyes for a moment, like she was counting backward from something sharp. When she opened them, she said, "Not here." I laughed once because the audacity nearly impressed me. "You do not get to choose the venue anymore, Nia." She looked toward the window where sleet streaked the glass. "He should not be here," she whispered. "That is not an answer." "No," she said, her voice turning rough. "It is not." She asked for water. I held the cup for her because my body had not caught up to my anger. After a sip, she said, "Andre is someone I was with before I met you." "Before?" I said, "Is that why he is calling the hospital with his child?" Her mouth trembled then, the first uncontrolled thing I had seen from her all month. "Kalen is mine, Ellis." For a second the room made no sense. The 4-pump beeped. Somewhere a cart rattled by. "Mine." I stood up so fast the chair tipped over. "You have a daughter." My voice cracked on the word daughter, like it belonged to a language I had never studied. Nia started crying quietly, not dramatic, just tears sliding into her hairline. "She is 9, she said. "Andre has raised her." I backed away from the bed. "Raised her? Where were you?" "I sent money." I almost shouted, then stopped, because another sentence had caught up to the first one. "Wait. Before I met you?" She looked straight at me, and because she was finally telling the truth, she did not hide behind tone or timing. "No," she said. "Not before." There are moments when your body makes a decision before your mind does. My hand went to the windowsill and gripped so hard the muscle in my forearm jumped. "How long?" I asked. "Tell me one true thing from the start." Nia was breathing fast now. 3 years, she said. On and off. It started during that period when I was commuting to St. Louis for training. I remember that year. I remembered microwave dinners and missed calls and her saying hospice certification classes were brutal. And the child, I asked. Her eyes closed again. Kalen was born 2 years after we married. The room did not explode. That was the worst part. It just kept existing. She told me the story in pieces because shame breaks language apart. Andre was a respiratory therapist She met during a hospital collaboration program in St. Louis. He was funny, divorced, and patient with her seriousness. Their affair started during a season when she and I were barely speaking, except about bills and my mother's surgery and the miscarriage that hollowed out our house. "I am not blaming you," she said quickly. I cut her off. "Do not insult me by trying to be fair." She flinched. She got pregnant. She told Andre she was leaving me. She told me nothing. Then she had the baby in St. Louis under her maiden name and came back saying she needed extended bereavement leave for an aunt. I sat down because my knees were no longer reliable. "You disappeared for 6 weeks," I said slowly, "and I believed you were a grieving family." Nia nodded, crying harder now. "Andre wanted us to be together. I thought I would go. Then I saw you at home one night, asleep on the couch with that ridiculous neck pillow and a plate still on your chest, because you had waited for me. I got scared. So you chose both." She did not answer because Yes was already in the room. She had arranged it with Andre. Kaylin would stay in St. Louis. She would visit for work conferences, training sessions, and occasional weekends. Andre would tell people she had a contract job out of state. How many people knew? I asked Andre, his sister, one old supervisor who helped with paperwork. And the nurses? Kaylin came once before, last month, when the prognosis changed. She said it like she knew every sentence made her smaller. She wanted to see me. I rubbed my face with both hands and caught the smell of hospital soap. "So all those years when you said you could not talk about children, when you cried every time somebody asked, you were already a mother?" Nia whispered, "Yes." And I sat there feeling guilty for wanting what you already had. Her mouth opened, then closed. Some harms are too exact for an apology. I left before I said something cruel enough to survive in my own memory. In the parking garage, cold wind whipped between the concrete levels and made my eyes water. I got in my truck and drove with no direction until I ended up outside a 24-hour diner near the freeway where truckers, nurses, and men with nowhere to go all wore the same expression. I ordered coffee and did not drink it. Around 3 in the morning, I searched court records, old social media scraps, public school newsletters. There she was, Kaylin Rowe, 4th grade perfect attendance, St. Louis. A school picture beside a science fair ribbon. She had Nia's eyes exactly. There are resemblances that feel like theft. By sunrise, I had decided 2 things. First, I would not confront Andre by phone like some movie husband begging for clarity from a man who owed me none. Second, I would meet that child before Nia died. Because if I did not, I would spend the rest of my life wondering whether my rage had erased someone else who had done nothing wrong. I drove back to the hospital, slept for 90 minutes in the truck, washed my face in the family restroom, and found Nia awake. "I am going to St. Louis," I told her. She went pale. "Please do not take this out on them." "Them," I repeated. "Listen to yourself." "Ellis," she said, struggling to sit up, "Andre is not a bad man." I almost smiled at the absurdity. "That is the one comforting thing you've told me." She reached for my hand, and I stepped back. The hurt on her face was immediate and deserved. "What do I tell Kaylin if she asks who I am?" I said. Nia looked at the blanket for a long time. "Tell her you are my husband." I waited, and she swallowed. "And tell her I was wrong. I should have demanded more. I should have made her say every ugly detail plainly. Instead, I looked at the woman dying in front of me and realized punishment would not make me less married to what had happened. So I left. St. Louis in late March looked like it could not decide on a season. Damp sidewalks, redbuds blooming, gray clouds hanging low over brick flats and liquor stores and church parking lots. Andre met me at a coffee shop in the Ville because I texted from the number I found in Nia's records. He knew who I was immediately. When he stood up, I recognized the posture before the face. A man trying to appear composed for somebody else's pain. He was taller than me, maybe 42, broad-shouldered, neat beard, clean denim jacket. He said, "I figured this day might come." I sat down and said, "That does not make you noble." He accepted that. "No," he said, "it does not." We talked for nearly 2 hours. He had met Nia in one of those fluorescent conference rooms with bad pastries and PowerPoint slides about end-of-life care coordination. He knew she was married after the first week. He told himself they were in something temporary, then convinced himself they were in love, then got trapped in the practical cruelty of half choices. When she got pregnant, he believed she would leave me. When she did not, he stayed because by then there was a baby and then a little girl with eczema and piano lessons and nightmares during thunderstorms. Weakness becomes routine faster than most sins. Why did you keep letting her come back? I asked him. He stared into his coffee. Because every time I tried to end it, Kaylin asked when her mother was visiting again. He looked up then, finally tired enough to be honest. And because I loved her for a long time after I should have stopped. I nodded because that part one understood too well. He had never met me, but he knew about my mother's arthritis, my old habit of restoring transit clocks, and my barbecue allergy to cilantro. Nia had divided herself with astonishing administrative skill. She had kept 2 homes alive using calendars, lies, and the discipline of a project manager. Then Kaylin came in from the restroom with a little backpack shaped like a ladybug and a chapter book tucked under her arm. She saw me, then looked at Andre. "Is this him?" she asked with the fearless bluntness children are born with. He said yes. I stood because sitting suddenly felt disrespectful. Kaylin studied my face. She had a gap between her front teeth and tiny gold studs in her ears. "Mama said you fixed the train lights," she said. "Signals," I answered. "Mostly." She nodded like that was acceptable. Then she asked, "Are you mad at me?" I think that question will live inside me until I die. "No," I said, "not even a little." We spent the afternoon at Forest Park because a hospital room was too cruel a place for introductions, and a coffee shop made everything feel like adult business. Kaylin brought a kite she could never get high enough, and I ran with her across damp grass in work boots while Andre watched from a bench, probably wondering what kind of fool I was. The truth is simple. Children rearrange the moral landscape just by standing in it. She talked about multiplication, a substitute teacher she disliked, and how her mother always smelled like lemon lotion. She says she might go to heaven soon. Kaylin said matter-of-factly, "Is heaven in Illinois or Wisconsin?" I had no answer worthy of her. That evening Andre and I sat in his car, while Kaylin was at her aunt's apartment upstairs. Rain ticked on the windshield. He said, "She wants to see Nia one more time." I stared through the wet glass at a row of sagging porches and blue recycling bins. "I do not know if I can carry that." Andre nodded. "I know." I thought about all the ways this could go wrong. A child in an ICU. My wife's last days turned into some impossible family pageant. My own pride demanded a clean line where none existed. Then I thought about Kaylin asking if I was mad at her. "Bring her," I said finally, "but no surprises. I want the truth in the room." When we got back to Milwaukee the next afternoon, Nia looked worse. Not dramatically, not in some television way, just diminished, smaller around the edges. The oncologist said there might be only days left. Morphine softened her voice and blurred the hours. When Andre and Kaylin entered, she started crying before they reached the bed. It was the first time I had ever seen her drop all performance. Kaylin climbed carefully into the chair beside her and held Nia's fingers like they were glass ornaments. "Hi, Mama," she whispered. Nia said, "Hi, baby girl," and I had to turn toward the window because there are some sacred wounds a husband is not entitled to witness head-on. Later, after the social worker arranged a conference room for us away from the machines, we all sat there with stale cookies and untouched water cups like we were attending the world's worst mediation session. Nia did not defend herself much. I will give her that. She said she had loved us all and acted like love exempted her from choosing. She said the miscarriage broke something in her, and having Kaylin secretly let her feel like she could be 2 women at once, the grieving wife and the redeemed mother. "But I became a liar in both places," she said. Andre looked exhausted. I looked past forgiveness into something harder. Accuracy. "Why did you stay with me?" I asked. No shouting, no drama, just a man asking for the fact he had earned years earlier. Nia pressed a tissue to her mouth. "Because you were home," she said. "And because every time I thought about leaving, I imagined the look on your face and I could not bear to be the villain in that story. I laughed then, tired and ugly. So you made me the fool instead. She nodded. Yes. There's freedom in hearing the cleanest version of your injury. It hurts exactly where it should. No haze, no excuse, just the shape of what happened and the person who made it happen. The next 3 days stretched like old elastic. Church mothers from Milwaukee brought casseroles nobody touched. My sister, Renee, came up from Indianapolis and looked at Nia with the careful politeness people reserve for the mortally ill and morally compromised. Daryl arrived with a duffel bag and sat with me in a family lounge watching a silent basketball game while saying almost nothing, which was perfect. Kaylin drew pictures at the children's table near the chapel. Andre handled phone calls with the school. Nia slept, woke, apologized, drifted, asked for Kaylin, asked for me, sometimes confused the order of years. The staff learned our strange constellation and adjusted it around it like professionals do. On the final lucid evening, Nia asked to speak to me alone. The sunset had turned the hospital blinds copper. She said, "There's a lockbox in the hall closet at home." I nearly smiled at the familiar beginning of another hidden thing. What now? She winced. Letters. One for you, one for Kaylin. Insurance papers, too. I changed the beneficiary last month. Half to you, half in trust for her. I said, "You think money can do the speaking?" "No," she answered. "I think it is all I have left besides the truth." Then she told me one more fact. She had planned to confess after her first round of treatment, if she survived it. Intentions are cheap at the edge of consequence. I told her something I had not known until that moment. I do not think I will ever forgive you in the way people mean when they say that word. She watched me, waiting, but I am not going to turn your daughter into collateral. Her face crumpled. Thank you. Do not thank me for being decent where you were not. She nodded once. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the distant intercom call for a respiratory consult. Finally she said, "You love me well. It should have comforted me." Instead, it made me furious because love had become one more place where I had performed faithfully in a play built on missing pages. Nia died 2 mornings later just before dawn, while rain tapped against the window, and the night nurse hummed under her breath as she checked monitors. It was quiet, no dramatic last speech, no miraculous clarity. I had my hand on her shoulder. Andre stood behind Kaylin, near the foot of the bed. When it was over, Kaylin leaned into him and did not cry right away, which broke me more than tears would have. Later, after the chaplain left and the paperwork began, I sat in the family consultation room staring at a box of tissues with blue flowers on it and understood that grief and betrayal can occupy the same chair without fighting. The weeks after the funeral were uglier than the funeral itself. Paperwork, probate, selling a car with her coffee mug still in the console, returning casseroles in mismatched dishes, answering church people who wanted a neat sentence for what happened. I took leave from work because I could not trust myself around live current while my mind wandered into old conversations. I opened the lockbox. Her letter to me was 7 pages long, full of remorse and memory, and one sentence I read 15 times. I mistook being needed in 2 places for being worthy in either. I did not cry over that letter. I underlined it. Some truths arrive too late and still matter. I made another decision then, one that half my family judged and the other half feared to comment on. I stayed in contact with Andre and Kaylin, not daily, not in some sentimental performance of instant blended grace, but real contact. We met once a month at first, usually halfway between Milwaukee and St. Louis at a diner near Bloomington, where the booze smelled faintly of syrup and bleach. I brought Kaylin a beginner soldering kit 1 month, and a book about famous black inventors the next. She wrote me thank you cards in careful block letters. Andre and I learned the awkward civility of men who had both been chosen unfairly and kept standing anyway. By autumn, the arrangement was no longer strange, just difficult in ordinary ways. Kaylin called me Mr. Ellis, then Ellis, and finally one day asked whether Uncle could count if there was no real category available. I told her family names are tools, not laws. We visited a railroad museum outside Union, Illinois, and she spent 40 minutes asking how signal lights decide who gets to move. I answered every question. At lunch, she dipped fries in a milkshake, which I consider evidence of weak character, and laughed exactly like Nia did when she forgot to guard herself. That sound no longer felt like theft. It felt like inheritance, complicated and alive. A year later, I sold a bungalow in Milwaukee and transferred back to Chicago. Not because I was running, though maybe some of me was. Mostly because grief had become too attached to certain corners of that house. The yellow laundry room, the cedar bench, the blue jar of New Year promises we never opened. I rented a place in South Shore with good light and a stubborn radiator and started taking Saturday jobs, restoring old church pews for extra cash. Sometimes I still wake up furious. Sometimes I miss Nia so sharply it embarrassed me. Both were true. Healing, I learned, is not choosing one story. It is learning to carry several without letting them drag behind you like chains. Last winter, Kaylin had a family tree assignment and called me in a panic because none of the boxes fit real people. I almost told her that was the most honest school project ever invented. Instead, I drove down to St. Louis with poster board, markers, and a bag of cinnamon rolls from a bakery Nia used to love. We sat at Andre's kitchen table under a humming fluorescent light and drew branches that bent where they needed to. Mother, Father, Ellis, Auntie Dana, Grandma Lucille. Spaces for truth, even where it hurts. When we finished, Kaylin looked at it and said, satisfied, "This is messy, but it is mine." I think that is the closest thing to peace any of us got. What stays with me in this story is not only the affair. It is the years of edited reality that made everybody else carry the weight of one woman's avoidance. Ellis's real turning points were not dramatic revenge moments. They were quieter choices. Not exploding in the hallway, meeting Kaylin without punishing her for adult lies, and refusing to let forgiveness become a shortcut past accountability. When somebody keeps crucial parts of their life behind locked doors, love alone will not make that safe. But even after betrayal, you still get to decide what kind of person you will be with the truth. If this story hit you as hard as it hit me, let me know in the comments what hurt more, the affair, the secret child, or the years of lies that came after. Stories like this remind us that betrayal is not always loud. Sometimes it is built one hidden truth at a time. So please like this video, share it with someone who loves unforgettable drama, and subscribe for more original relationship stories, cheating stories, and emotional narrations like this. The end.